Emma and James Harper were the perfect picture of love and devotion. Nestled in the idyllic town of Edgewater, Maine, they had recently celebrated their 2-week wedding anniversary when their lives took an unexpected turn. "I have something to tell you," Emma said nervously, her hands trembling as she held a small box. She had been planning this moment for days, rehearsing how she'd deliver the news. James looked up from the antique rocking chair he was restoring. His blue eyes crinkled with curiosity. "What is it?" Emma handed him the box. Inside was a tiny pair of white baby shoes with a note that read, "Coming soon. Baby Harper." James' mouth fell open, his expression transforming into pure joy. "Are you serious?" He leapt from his seat, lifting Emma in a tight embrace. The two were overjoyed, and from that moment on, their lives revolved around preparing for their new addition. Every ultrasound, every appointment brought them closer to the little boy they had seen on the monitor. "This is our son," James would whisper, holding Emma's hand as the technician showed them the grainy image of a tiny figure. Emma smiled, feeling the flutter of tiny kicks in her belly. "He's already so loved." They decorated the nursery with soft blues and nautical decor, reflecting the charm of their coastal town. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets Emma tucked into the dresser drawers. Everything seemed perfect, until the baby shower. It was a bright Sunday afternoon when Emma's friends threw her a surprise baby shower at the town's beloved Cove Cafe. The venue overlooked Edgewater's serene harbor, the salty breeze carrying with it the laughter of seagulls and the gentle lapping of waves. Emma was glowing, her long auburn hair framing her face as she opened gifts surrounded by friends. She marveled at the tiny Onuses and giggled at the joke ones her best friend Emma had bought, which read, "Future Captain." "James is going to love this one," Emma said, holding up a little captain's hat, but as the laughter bubbled around her, Emma suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She froze, her hand flying to her belly. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with concern. Emma's face contorted in pain. "I think something's wrong. I feel," she cried out, gripping the edge of the table as another wave of pain coursed through her. Okay, let's get you to the hospital," Emma said, already dialing James. Edgewater Memorial Hospital was unusually quiet when they arrived, the sterile smell of antiseptic greeting them as nurses rushed to Emma's aid. James arrived moments later. His shirt rumpled and his face pale. "What happened?" he asked, taking Emma's hand. "I don't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The doctors confirmed she was in early labor." It was too soon. Emma was only 28 weeks along, but the process couldn't be stopped. As James stood by her side, his heart raced. He was terrified but determined to support his wife. Hours later, the delivery room was filled with tension. The doctor finally announced, "It's a girl." Emma and James both froze. "What?" James blurted. "A girl? That can't be right." Emma was too exhausted to speak, her mind reeling. "But we were told it was a boy. Every ultrasound showed a boy." Before they could process this, the doctor's voice interrupted. "Wait. There's another baby coming." James' grip on Emma's hand tightened as another wave of contractions hit. Minutes later, a second baby was born. "It's a boy," the doctor said, handing the second baby to a nurse. "Twins." They had twins, but as the babies were cleaned and placed in the bassinet, James noticed something strange. The baby boy looked nothing like the ultrasounds they'd seen. His features were entirely different. His dark hair and olive complexion didn't match the light-haired, fair-skinned child they'd been expecting. Emma noticed it too. "James, what's going on?" Before the Harpers could voice their concerns, the hospital's power flickered. The sudden darkness was brief, but unsettling. When the lights came back on, alarms were blaring in the hallway. "What's happening?" Emma asked weakly. A nurse rushed into the room, her face pale. Dr. Patel, the maternity records room has been broken into. James stood abruptly. What? Why? The doctor exchanged a worried glance with the nurse. I don't know, but we need to secure all patient files immediately. As the medical staff hurried out, James turned back to Emma. Something's not right here. Emma clutched his hand. James, do you think someone switched our babies? In the days that followed, the Harpers were haunted by questions. The hospital assured them the twins were healthy, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He began digging through their medical records, noticing discrepancies. One ultrasound scan, performed at a clinic Emma had visited alone, showed strange anomalies, a timestamp that didn't match the time she remembered being there. Emma, James said one night as they sat in the nursery, the twins asleep in their cribs. Do you remember that day? The day of that scan? She frowned, trying to recall. Yes. I remember being told you couldn't come in because the technician was running behind. They said it was standard procedure. James shook his head. But that's not standard. They always let me in before. I think something happened that day. Emma's blood ran cold. You think they switched the babies then? One evening, as the Harpers tried to make sense of the mystery, James noticed a dark sedan parked outside their house. The same car had been there the past 3 nights. He stepped outside, but the car drove off before he could approach. When he returned, he found a note taped to their front door. It read, "Stop asking questions. For your safety, leave the past alone." James paced the living room, gripping the note tightly in his hand. Emma sat on the couch, cradling their daughter while glancing nervously at the front door. The words on the note felt like a dark cloud settling over their once happy home. James, Emma whispered, what does this mean? Who would leave something like that? James stopped pacing and looked at her, his jaw tightening. It means someone doesn't want us digging into the truth. But I'm not stopping until I figure this out. He couldn't shake the feeling that their twins were at the center of something much bigger, something sinister. But he knew confronting it would put them in danger. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to the hospital, James declared. I'll request every record they have on file for you and the babies. Emma hesitated, her eyes darting to the bassinet where their son lay sleeping. Be careful, James. If someone went to the trouble of breaking into the hospital and leaving a note, they are watching us. The next morning, James walked into Edgewater Memorial Hospital with a determined stride. He approached the records department, where an older woman with kind eyes sat behind the desk. Good morning, he began. I'm James Harper. My wife, Emma Harper, delivered twins here last week. I need to request a copy of all her medical records. The woman typed on her computer. But her smile faded. That's odd, she muttered. James leaned forward. What's odd? Some of the records from her file. They are missing. The ultrasound scans and technician notes from one of her earlier visits are gone. James felt a chill run down his spine. How is that possible? Are the files digitized? Yes, but there's no trace of them in our backups either. It's like they were intentionally deleted, she replied, lowering her voice. James clenched his fists. Who has access to those records? Only authorized staff. But the woman hesitated. There was a technician who left abruptly a few months ago. Some of us thought it was suspicious, but we never questioned it. What was their name? James pressed. Claire Hensley, she whispered. But I heard she moved out of state. James thanked her and left, his mind racing. Who was Claire Hensley, and what did she have to do with their twins? Back home, James told Emma about the missing records and the mysterious technician. "We need to find Claire," he said. Emma frowned. "But how? If she moved out of state, she could be anywhere." James sat down at his laptop, pulling up a search engine. He entered the name Claire Hensley Edgewater Memorial and began combing through results. After hours of searching, he found an article about Claire's sudden departure. The headline read, "Local ultrasound technician resigns amid controversy over unauthorized testing. What does that mean?" Emma asked, leaning over his shoulder. James opened the article. It detailed allegations that Claire had performed unauthorized procedures on several patients. Some claimed their scans had been altered, but the hospital had swept the complaints under the rug to avoid bad publicity. "Emma," James said, his voice low, "what if Claire altered your scans? What if our twins were switched during one of your appointments?" Emma's eyes widened. "But why? What would she gain from that?" James shook his head. "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." That night, the dark sedan returned. This time, James didn't wait. He grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside. "Hey!" he shouted, approaching the car. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a black coat stepped out. His face was partially hidden in the shadows. "Who are you?" James demanded. "Why are you watching my family?" The man smirked. "You're asking the wrong questions, Mr. Harper." "What do you mean?" "You should be asking why someone wanted your twins separated. And why they'd go to such lengths to make it happen." James froze. "Separated? What are you talking about?" The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your twins were never meant to be together. Someone went to a lot of trouble to ensure they wouldn't be." Before James could press further, the man climbed back into the car and drove off, leaving James standing in the driveway, stunned. The next day, James insisted they run a DNA test on the twins. "We need to know if they are really ours," he told Emma. Emma reluctantly agreed, though the idea broke her heart. A week later, the results arrived. James opened the envelope with trembling hands. "Emma," he said, his voice shaking, "the results show that only one of the twins is biologically ours." Emma gasped, tears streaming down her face. "What does that mean? Where did the other baby come from?" James shook his head. "I don't know. But whoever that man was, he's right. Someone deliberately placed that baby with us." Determined to uncover the truth, James and Emma began researching Claire Hensley's past. They discovered she had once worked at a private research facility just outside Edgewater. "This place specializes in genetic engineering and fertility treatments," James said, reading from a website. "What if this wasn't a mix-up?" Emma whispered. "What if the twins were part of some kind of experiment?" James and Emma drove through the dense woods outside Edgewater, following the directions they'd uncovered to the research facility where Claire Hensley had once worked. The building was abandoned, its grey walls cracked and overtaken by ivy. "This is it," James said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Emma shivered, clutching her coat. "Do you think we'll find answers here?" "We have to," James replied, his jaw set. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of chemicals lingered. They found an office with files scattered across the floor. James rifled through them, finally uncovering a folder labeled Project Genesis. "What's this?" Emma asked, leaning over his shoulder. James opened it and began reading aloud. Project Genesis aims to create genetically enhanced embryos to test their viability in natural birth scenarios. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. They were experimenting with embryos? James flipped through the pages, finding names and dates. "Look at this," he said, pointing to Emma's name. "You were one of their subjects. They must have implanted a second embryo without your knowledge." Tears streamed down Emma's face. "That's why the ultrasounds didn't match. They switched our baby with another to hide what they'd done. As they left the facility, James' phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello? Mr. Harper, this is Claire Hensley," the voice on the other end said. James froze. "Claire? We've been looking for you." "I know," she replied. "And I know why. Meet me at the Edgewater Lighthouse tonight. I'll tell you everything." That night, James and Emma stood under the towering lighthouse, the waves crashing violently against the rocks below. Claire appeared, her face pale and lined with guilt. "I never wanted this to happen," Claire began, her voice trembling. "The facility blackmailed me into participating. They wanted to create a perfect human by mixing embryos from genetically superior donors. When I realized what they were doing, I tried to sabotage the project by switching the babies back. But I was too late. They fired me and erased my tracks." Emma's voice broke. "So you're saying one of our babies isn't ours?" Claire nodded. "Your daughter is biologically yours. Your son, he's from another family. But I couldn't stop the experiment. They wanted to see how two genetically different children would grow up under the same conditions." James clenched his fists. "Who are these people? Why would they do this?" Claire shook her head. "I don't know who's funding them, but they are powerful. They've been watching you, ensuring the truth stays hidden." Suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness. A black SUV sped toward them. "They've found us," Claire whispered. "You need to run." James grabbed Emma's hand, and they sprinted back to their car, but the SUV blocked their path. Men in dark suits stepped out. Their faces cold and emotionless. "Hand over the folder," one of them ordered. James held the folder tightly. "Not a chance." The man raised a gun, aiming it at James. "I won't ask again." Emma stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Please? These are our children. Don't take them from us." The man hesitated, then motioned for his team to lower their weapons. "We don't want the children. We want the evidence. Give us the folder, and this ends here." James looked at Emma, his heart torn. He knew the folder was their only proof, but keeping it could put their lives at risk. Emma placed a hand on his arm. "James, we have to protect our family. Give it to them." Reluctantly, James handed over the folder. The men retreated to their SUV, leaving the Harpers standing in the cold night air. Their world forever changed. In the days that followed, life in Edgewater seemed to return to normal, but James and Emma knew their lives would never be the same. They contacted a lawyer and began the process of ensuring both twins would legally remain in their care. As Emma rocked the babies to sleep one night, James sat beside her, his voice heavy with emotion. "I'm sorry, Emma. I couldn't protect you or our children from this." Emma reached for his hand. "You did protect us, James. You kept us together. That's all that matters." She looked down at the twins, their tiny faces peaceful in slumber. "They are both ours, no matter where they came from. We'll love them and protect them, no matter what." James nodded, tears streaming down his face. "They are our family. No one will take that from us." But deep down, they knew the shadow of Project Genesis still lingered. Somewhere out there, powerful forces were watching, waiting for their next move, and James and Emma vowed they would be ready. Years later, as the twins grew, subtle differences began to emerge. Their son displayed remarkable intelligence, solving puzzles meant for much older children. Their daughter, while bright, exhibited an uncanny empathy, often sensing emotions others couldn't express. James and Emma cherished every moment, but the questions never stopped haunting them. Who were the people behind Project Genesis? And would they ever come back? One day, while playing in the yard, the twins discovered an envelope hidden beneath a rock. Inside was a single note: "We're still watching." What did you think will happen to the children as they grow? If you want a part 2 of what happened next, comment saying part 2.
Please subscribe, like, comment and share this video. It means a lot to us. Thank you.